What's up, everybody? This is Colin Dijs. I'm here today with Ross Macfarlane, and in this video, we will explain to you how to optimize on a CPM bidding strategy while media buying. So in this example, we'll take native advertising, but you can apply this to almost every CPM bidding model platform, like, for example, Snapchat ads, Facebook ads, Pinterest ads, etc. So we have four distinguished topics, which will lead into competition, where obviously it's always about the competition. So we have the bid, the reach, the algorithm, and specific rules we set up to get into a position where we can media buy these CPM bidding model profitably, because that's obviously always the goal, to get to profits, preferably as soon as possible. The bid. The bid in the scenario of CPM is basically on a Bidfloor, right? So the actual bid you put can differ into scenarios. One, you have first price bidding, and two, you have second price bidding. So first price bidding is what we call real CPM. So what you bid is actually what you pay. On second price bidding, you pay 1 cent more than the second highest bid. So how that works, so this is basically a bid of $1 is a bid of $1, that's what you pay. And on second price bidding, how that works is, Ross, how much are you going to bid, Ross?
I am going to bid $1.16.
$1.16. Colin bids $1.29, but I'm only going to pay $1.17, right? So I pay 1 cent more than the second highest bid. Now Ross can increase all the way to, let's say, 25, and I will win the bid with 26, still not 29. So he has to cross that point. Second price bidding, therefore, a lot more competition friendly, right? Make sense?
Yes.
Otherwise, the bid is very simple. It functions on a win rate, which is important to know. So basically, the overall available traffic relative to your bid will give you how much of a percentage you win in the auction model on supply and demand. Right? The bid's quite boring for CPM, it's quite simple. Just need to know the difference between these two, where most of the ad formats are always first price bidding. Second price is nice, but a little bit more competitive. Well, we come back to that in the competition model. So the reach, based off the win rate, right? So it's basically your bid versus the other bids is win rate. According to your bid, how many bids are you actually winning? And according to the bid you've won, the impressions will show, right? The bid you set is actually, of course, let me just put that there, per 1,000 impressions, all right? Then the win rate will obviously influence that. The reach, otherwise, is basically only limited by the publisher inventory. How much inventory is available and how much can you buy off this inventory. The algorithm will basically offer you metrics based on one important factor, which I like on CPM. Most CPM platforms work this way unless they have like an optimization algorithm like Facebook. But let's say you talk about FOIM DSP under CPM bidding model, they have an equal distribution because the creatives that don't necessarily compete with one another. So on the testing phase, on the creatives, you have 111, 222, 333 in terms of impressions. This is obviously very beneficial if you want to test the creatives evenly, right? Which is on a CPC bidding model, very different. And it's basically the exact opposite. The teasers are very chaotic and you need to pay proper attention. What else do we have for the algorithm, Ross?
iCTR, image click-through rate. That will be the best one to optimize for.
Okay, so the more people click on your creative, so let me just push this not to algorithm, but to rules. And make a little bit of a mathematical equation, yeah? Make it a little bit more clear. So let's say you pay $10 for 1,000 impressions. You have an iCTR of 10%. Well, let's do 1%. It's more likely, right? So you basically get 10 clicks, right? For $10. So a $1 CPC. Make sense?
Yep.
Perfect. Now let's say I have a $10 CPM. Just write CPM behind it. And I have still, I get 1,000 impressions, right? Impressions. Now in this example, however, I have an iCTR of 2%. So that means I get 20 clicks for $10. My CPC goes through half to 50 cents, which means I have a lot more room to scale and to potentially up the bid. So the dominant factor over CPM bidding model and the biggest part of your optimization process regarding the bidding model will be iCTR, which Ross just mentioned, which is 100% correct. The iCTR has a big influence. Well, of course, whether relative to the algorithm, the reach, the bid, the iCTR is something that you have full control over. The amount of inventory that is available, you don't control. The equal distribution of creatives, testing, that is nice to have, but not a need to have. The bid versus other bids, well, you put in the bid, right? So depending on first, second price bidding, the bid is still an extremely important metric. So I'll just make that yellow, right? And then the iCTR will be a very important metric because the better creatives you can make, which are more favorable by the audience, the cheaper you can buy the clicks, where the reach is still relative, which means you can pay more CPM, right, than anybody else. So in this example, you could double the CPM to $20 and still end up with a $1 cost per click, but now you potentially have room to buy twice the amount of traffic. Let me make the real example for you guys. Right, so in this example, my room to compete, so this is Ross, right? And this is me, just a little bit better ads, a double bid. So we pay both the same amount, but I tap into a way new category of reach, which is right on the upper part, where Ross is still in the bottom part because his Bidfloor only goes to $10, where mine goes to $20. So anything in between that or less, I will be able to buy because my creatives are better. But of course, it has to be profitable still at that scale. But with CPM, the bid, so basically the bid versus expense model is simple, right? If you have watched our analysis on a CPC bidding model, which we also have on this channel, you might want to check it out. You will see that it's 2 pages. It is a lot more complicated. There are a lot more metrics involved. With CPM, all you have to do is make amazing creative that get high iCTR. Do not make it clickbait though. So keep it in line with a coherent flow that it converts well. And then slowly up the Bidfloor relative to the capabilities, where you basically have CPC versus earnings per click on your total flow, which is profitable, right? So you can push the Bidfloor, but only to a certain extent. So the higher your iCTR, in theory, the higher CPM you can afford, right, Ross?
Yes, and also when doing it, raising the bid from the bid floor incrementally, by this point, you've bought enough impressions to have the best working funnel with regards to image, headline, lander, click-through rate, which has all been tested systematically. So then when you are raising your bids, you're then tapping into that higher traffic band, but with a working funnel, which is...
with already the completely optimized backstage of that. So yeah, perfect. Let me sketch out this situation then on the competition. So basically all you need to look for is bid 1, right? Let me just write 1 bid, 2 win rate, because that's basically your reach potential. At that point, you already have the creatives optimized. So the creatives are optimized. And so the optimization on the CPM model is basically increasing the bid floor, right? Just giving it small bumps, while simultaneously taking into account the win rate, because how much of the traffic you're actually buying in a situation where, let me give you an example. You have a bid of 24.16 and your win rate is, let's say, 96%, right? This is CPM here. Okay. What we could assume is that if an advertiser with a $25 bid stops his campaign and the campaign runs on, let's say, 10K a day, your win rate potentially might easily shoot to 125%, which is possible, right? Which basically means that this 25% you're spending, but with no additional benefit because there's not more traffic. Why would an ad exchange do this? Because they make more fucking money, right? It's just a relative competition thing. This would only happen, of course, this equation, you name it, first price bidding. This is never possible second price bidding because you bid 1 more cent than the second highest bid, right? So for this example, when we say the CPM bidding model is not as complicated relative to a CPC bidding model, however, there's a few very important, which we have here, the whole list to consider to be able to make the right adjustments. So the bid, the win rate, the creative optimization, the increasing of the bid floor, and then of course continuously the relative competition. What's going on, what's working, and this is basically your ultimate competitive power. It is the equation of CPC versus EPC and the total volume of traffic. So let me just write out the example we did in the other one as well. If you, Ross, again, would have the choice between 10% or 100%, 100% ROI over $100 ad spend, or 10% ROI over $1,100 in ad spend, which one would you pick?
The second one, 10% ROI over $1,100, as it equals more profits.
So although the ROI is less, the numeric value profit is higher because it's $10 more. So if it's a question about cash flow, you would always pick this one, which of course on a CPM model, in any model, the cash flow plays an important role, right? I think it will always play an important role. However, in the scenario under competition, there is not much more to look at than simply making sure that you always strive for the highest iCTR, but it's not on optimization, it's more on the testing of creatives, which we also have videos on this channel about. And then increasing the bid floor while keeping your profitability strong, because when you scale the bids, so let's say bid goes up, would mean that the CPC is up, but at the same time your earnings per click stay the same, because the theory where people say because you tap into a higher, more expensive audience doesn't mean that the quality improves. This is a very big media buying myth. If I bid more, the quality is better. It is 99% of the time not necessarily true. There are a lot of other metrics that determine the specific quality of a converting audience. Most of the time, it is the specific bids, not necessarily that this audience converts only on those bids, right? So in this example, ROI would go down, right? Because the EPC stays the same, the CPC goes up, so our return goes down. So then all of a sudden, a mathematical equation here is the most important thing to optimize it properly. If you optimize it the wrong way, your EPC stays the same, your CPC goes up because you're trying to get into a more reach model to get a higher net profit but a lower ROI, and you push it too hard, the campaign goes into the negative. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's the only mistake when optimizing a CPM bidding model that you need to be aware of, that you don't overdo it on the actual optimization of the model by increasing the bid floor too much relative to the other competition. These two are very important, which basically not necessarily has to do with the win rate, because that's just an indication of reach potential. It has to do with this specific, very important metric. Your earnings per click always have to be higher than your cost per click to stay into the profitability, taking into account landing page, click-through rate, all these other things. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
I think this was an easy one. I think this is very
Yes,
clear. I don't think we
it
have
is.
to add many other information, many other elements regarding the information on the CPM bidding model, because it's quite easy. You know, there's a lot of things you could say about it additionally, which would only make it more confusing. The most important part is get the reach, stay in profit, of course, by using that simple equation where you know that at least the ROI you have is strong and steady. What would you prefer, Ross, if you would media buy CPM or CPC?
Depending on cash flow, probably CPC, but I think with both CPC and CPM, I think the underlying factor is always create great ads. So don't just go on a spy tool and rip and run. You'll never get longevity that way. So whether you're running CPC or CPM, just create great ads and you'll always have room for profit.
Damn, that's deep. I would choose CPC any day because I like the complexity of it more. I like the multiple variables, but if you are a beginner, let's say less than $1,000 a day in ad spend, definitely start with CPM. It's a lot easier to read the metrics and have a steady overview. If you have any questions about the CPM bidding model, how the testing, optimization, or scaling of these models work, feel free to drop a comment down below with your question, and we might as well pick it up in the next video. Ross, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.